Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Military Spouse to Millionaire. Today I'm going to continue talking to all of my sellers out there. And the reason for so much seller related content in my podcast, if you follow me on social media, is because I am very much in my seller agent season right now. I always have so many buyers, and that is still definitely the case, but in my 8 years of doing real estate here in Hawaii, I would say right now and really for the last 2 months, I have had the most listing that I've had actively at one time in my career, which is so thrilling and so exciting. And most of them are return clients that I helped buy and now are selling. And that is an amazing joy of mine. And I'm so fortunate that my past clients do come back to me when it's time to sell. But I want to talk to all of them, and I want to talk to all of you. And honestly, this podcast episode might make its way into my listing presentation that I send out virtually ahead of my in-person meetings with people, just to sort of serve as a little bit more prep and education for future sellers, whether you're a past client of mine or not. All of this market information is going to be gold as far as setting you up for success as a seller in our market. Now, let me talk to you quickly about why I think sellers right now in our market, I think, have it the most difficult of any sellers that I've worked with in my 8 years of doing this. The reason I think sellers have it so hard now isn't because their homes aren't selling. It isn't because they're losing money. I think sellers right now have it so hard because sellers who are selling now bought in 2021 or a lot of times beginning to middle of 2022. And our market here in Hawaii was so vastly different. The landscape of the market in 2021 especially was so in stark contrast to what it is now. And what I mean by that is starting in 2020, obviously, and then absolutely all of 2021 and part of 2022, our market for buyers meant that you had to come in hot. I mean, houses were lasting hours. People were offering crazy over asking price, waiving contingencies, bringing cash down for appraisal shortfall clauses. I was writing 5 or 6 offers at a time for one client, submitting 5 offers at a time, literally just throwing spaghetti at a wall and praying that something stuck. That was the tone and energy and reality of the market at that time. And so if you take a buyer who is now a seller that purchased during that time where, frankly, if you were a seller in 2021, you could have a bedroom on fire and still get over asking price for your house and somebody willing to give you one of their kidneys. It was wild, guys. And so my sellers who bought then are now going into selling knowing that the market has changed, fundamentally knowing a little bit that the market is not quite that anymore, but they are not prepared a lot of times for the reality of the market now. And what I mean by that is the reality of the market now is you as a seller in Hawaii, I'm not talking about any other markets. I got no business talking about any other real estate markets. Those aren't my markets. This is my market. Here in Hawaii as a seller, you need to come to terms and make peace with the fact that dollars to donuts, unless someone is wanting to assume your loan, you as a seller need to be educated on, and this is me telling you, and you need to make peace with the fact that you very likely are going to be asked, you don't have to, but you're going to be asked to give the buyer who's purchasing your home credit. And what they're going to do with that credit is buy down their interest rate. Now, the $1 million question is, why would I do that? As a seller, why would I give $10,000 or $15,000 of my profit away to the buyer? And the short answer is because you need to sell your house. And because here in Hawaii, we do see generally strong enough appreciation that a seller can do this and still be walking away with a profit. So yes, absolutely. If you're a seller who bought in 2021 or beginning of 2022 when the market was wild and buyers were making all the concessions, and you were a buyer then and you had to make concessions to get a house, and now you're also having to make concessions as a seller, I know that can feel kind of a little bit frustrating, and no one is glossing over that. However, 9 times out of 10, you as a seller are still walking away with benefit, with profit, with cash in hand, with return on investment. And giving credit to a buyer so that they can buy down the interest rate to get their payments low enough for the first year or 2 years so that we still have interested parties purchasing your home. That short-term sacrifice is worth the long-term benefit of securing a buyer with reasonable days on market so that you leave this island with a check and not a Hawaii mortgage payment. Is the check $10,000 or $15,000 less sometimes? Yes. Not always. Not always are buyers going to ask for credits, but I can tell you last year in 2024, I did 71 transactions. Every single buyer that I represented got credit from the seller they were buying the home from. Any listings that I had, I briefed my sellers on this that we're talking about right now, and that is, hey, you can choose to say no to this request, but don't be surprised if buyers submitting an offer ask you for credit. The reason they're wanting that credit is to buy down the interest rate, to make the homes more affordable so that buyers can keep purchasing homes. Now, have interest rates fluctuated and changed up and down a little bit, 2023, 2024, in 2025? Sure. And are they going down? Largely, yes. I'm not a mortgage broker. I'm not quoting interest rates, but I am an agent who does a lot of business married to a mortgage broker. So I do see a lot of those conversations happening. If rates continue to go down, will sellers needing to give credits lessen and go away? Yes. And that's what we're all hoping for. If rates are naturally going down, buyers aren't going to need those credits to buy down their interest rate. But let this just serve as a very blanket warning or education to sellers out there. You should have the expectation in your mind that it is very normal, almost, I would say, standard operating procedure right now in our market for buyers to request and get credits from you as a seller. And I feel like that's important to note up front. It's something that I talk about all my sellers with. It's something that I want to put out there so that no sellers can say, like, I didn't know this was a possibility. I would rather tell you now than get an offer or 2 offers or 3 offers and every single one of them be requesting these credits and you not have any idea why, you not know that it's normal, and then you're really taken off guard and by surprise. So if we get an offer and there's no credits requested, I'm probably going to very strongly advise you to seriously consider taking that offer because that's great. The other thing that I really want sellers right now to understand is that while all homes in Hawaii are sold as is, which basically means unless something is hazard or safety related, we as the seller side are advertising and disclosing upfront that you as the seller are not going to be nickel and dimed for like cosmetic repairs. And while, yes, that is all true on paper, in reality, buyers right now, their give a fuck is low. And that's the nicest way that I can put that. Buyers are going to press their luck. And that is just because I think we as human beings are a little bit opportunistic, and the same can be true of sellers. Sellers, back in 2020, back in 2021, you guys were out of control. I'm talking to all of you sellers out there, to include myself. I sold my house in 2021 for crazy over asking price. It with like 6 days on the market. It was ridiculous. I think we sold for like $35,000 over asking price. Okay, we were living high, and that's true for all sellers. Unfortunately, the wheel of fortune keeps spinning, and right now buyers are kind of getting their get back, in the sense of, even though it's as is, and even though you're disclosing up front that you're not fixing cosmetic things, buyers are still gonna request what they're gonna request. Buyers are gonna do buyer things right now, because even though it's still a seller's market in terms of like inventory, it's more of a buyer's market in terms of being able to negotiate benefits. So getting credits, having sellers, maybe repair or replace things that in 2021, like I said, in 2021, a bedroom could have been on fire. Buyers weren't asking for anything. Buyers were still offering over asking price. Buyers were still giving basically whatever they could give to get homes. And now all the people who were buyers during that time are selling and having to deal with the fact that they're having to give credits. They're having to fix things that are more on the cosmetic side, or deal with buyers that are requesting things. So don't be offended. Don't be outraged. Don't be shocked, sellers, if a buyer comes and is requesting things that maybe 3 years ago I told you, hey, you can't request that. It's as is. And that's true. And that's still true. But the market now is not the same as the market then. And the expectations need to be different in accordance to what is standard. And keep in mind, sellers, that you don't have to say yes to any of these things. You don't have to give credits. You don't have to entertain fixing cosmetic things for a buyer that they might be requesting. You just need to know what the market norm is and the standards are, and sort of have those realistic expectations. Because if you get into contract and then you let it fall out of escrow over the buyers requesting $1,000 credit for something, then we have to go back on the market. We have to find another buyer. We have to go through that whole process again, without any guarantee that the next buyer is going to ask for less or ask for different stuff, or they could ask for more. And we talk about those things in real time as they come up, but this is more just meant to generally educate. I know last week, or maybe week before last, depending on when we decide to release this podcast episode, talked a lot about open houses and seller expectations around open houses, and how they're largely bullshit, and how having an open house is not going to be the linchpin to success for securing a buyer for your home. And then now in this episode, I'm talking about, giving credits. And I want to talk actually quickly about days on market. Let me just stop my whole train of thought there and talk about days on market before I completely forget, because this is a huge one. And I say this with absolute understanding that selling a house is a far more passive activity versus buying a house. And especially because a lot of my clients are first-time home buyers when I help them buy, and then are subsequently first-time home sellers. You don't know. You don't know what the process of selling feels like or what it looks like. And that's part of the reason that I am probably going to put this podcast episode into my listing packet, so that, it can kind of be a quick debrief. Selling is very transactional. Being a seller feels very passive, like I said. And what I mean by that is we do all of the work for selling your house kind of up front and behind the scenes. So I come, I do my listing appointments with people. We talk about going live, the list price, what needs to be done to get the house showing ready. That's the biggest piece of selling, is getting the house photo ready, showing ready, sort of keeping it that way, dealing with the minor inconveniences of getting out of the house when there is showing requests. Those are like the big things you're doing as a seller. But once we're active on the market, it kind of feels like nothing is happening. And sellers inherently get a little, I don't know what the right word is. They kind of chafe a little bit. They kind of want, to feel like something is happening. And I feel like that's why sellers want open houses, because they feel like an open house is like a productive, like something is happening. I'm having an open house. When in reality, you can see my podcast episode on that. That's not the golden ticket that you think it is. And I have found that sellers, as a byproduct of that, are like messaging me all the time, like wanting to lower the price, or wanting to have an open house, or wanting more marketing, or wanting, things to be done that are already being done. I have a marketing team. We have a marketing strategy. We have a calendar for marketing the properties. We work with the title company. They send out email blasts. Your property is on my YouTube, on my Instagram, on my Facebook, on my TikTok, on a cycle. It's not like we just market and advertise one time. And we market in videos, in photos, in carousel posts, we boost the posts. Like, I pay extra money to have a larger audience viewing your properties. We do have one open house. So all of these things are happening, but sellers, again, who bought in 2021 or 2022 have this feeling of like their house is on the market for a week and they've only had one showing or no showings. And you guys, like, some of you out there as sellers are in like full-fledged panic, like really concerned. And I am always here, and I'm always happy to hear those concerns, to talk through those concerns. Let's grab a coffee. Let's get on the phone. Let's text about it. Like, whatever your preferred method of communication is, I'm here for all those things. But the reality of being a seller right now is you shouldn't expect instant activity. It is quite normal to go a week or 2 weeks and not have any showings, or have very slow showing activity. And that's indicative by our days on market. So back in 2021, average days on market was maybe 15, maybe 18. In 2020, it was like 7. Average days on market right now, I looked this morning, for the last 90 days for townhouses and condos is hovering right about 50. 50 days on market is pretty typical. And the reason that's important is because 50 days is the average from the time a home gets listed for sale until it's in contract. It's taking 50 days, which is just shy of 2 months. So if you're not getting a ton of activity day 1, week 1, week 2, I would say that's pretty typical, because it's taking almost 2 months for the market to do its thing and for buyers to be secured for a home. And that is the average days on market. And the search that I did, just to be clear on the statistical data and how I pulled it and all of that, that was I did one for townhomes, one for single family homes. The areas I did were Mililani, Eva Beach, Kapolei, Makakilo, Pearl City, Aiea, Salt Lake. Kind of that is what makes up the bulk of like my business, where common areas where military families choose to live. So that's where I did my search. And within those common areas, probably where many of you may own homes, that's the average. So if we're not getting any activity day 1, week 1, week 2 on the market, just know things are still going on behind the scenes. I am sending your house out to people that I'm talking to. You guys, about 1/4 of the transactions that I do in any given year are dual agencies, which means I represent the buyer and the seller. I will do a podcast episode on that, because a lot of people have questions about that and how can you represent both sides and is that fair? And I will talk about that. Yes, I'm very extremely careful when I do it, and it does come with a lot of needing to educate both sides on, disclosure rules, and I have to disclose everything to both parties equally. But I have found that over my years of doing this and doing business in that way, as long as I've openly and honestly managed seller expectations and open and honestly educated buyers, both parties know what's normal. And that's part of what I'm doing right now. So if I have a buyer and they're requesting a credit from my seller, I've already educated my seller that regardless of the buyer, they're probably going to request a credit. So when my buyer requests the credit, the seller is not going to say, are they only requesting that credit because they're your buyer? They're not, because I'm already telling you as a seller that it's normal in the market for buyers to request a credit. But on the same token, I'm going to have educated this buyer that it's normal for them to get credits from a seller. So if my seller is not willing to give a credit, I'm going to tell the buyer that's not the market norm. And if they're not willing to do it, you should pursue a different property, because that is a market norm for a buyer to be able to get that. And my sellers know that it's a market norm because I'm telling you right now that it's a market norm. So I have found, as long as I am prudent and diligent with educating both parties from the beginning, even though I might not know that they're going to link up later, I've already educated this party and I've already educated this party on what normal is. And then when they come in, as long as the requests are within norms, I have found that it's not a problem. So I guess I don't need a whole podcast episode on it, but I can do one if you guys want one to talk about dual agency more and how it works. And no, actually, I don't make more money doing a dual agency. I actually make less money with a dual agency. And if you have questions on that, message me directly. I'm happy to break down the math for you. But no, fun fact, I make less money and my team does twice the work for dual agencies. Going back to days on market. So don't panic, sellers. If we're day one, week two, and you're not getting a ton of market activity, don't panic. I would say that that is just the expectation, the market norm. Things are still very much going on behind the scenes, like I said, in terms of marketing, advertising, me sending your property to clients that I'm talking to see if I have an interested buyer. I went to one of my listings yesterday and I did like a video tour, posted on my story. We're doing all the things behind the scenes. Even if I'm not checking in with you every single day, things are still going on. And you should absolutely check in with me whenever you want. But also know that I'm a very process-driven person, business owner. My team has processes in place. How it works is I'm the listing agent. I'm only one person. I can't do everything myself, as I talk about a lot. And as a business owner running a very successful real estate business, I have learned over the years the importance of delegating. So I am your listing agent, and then I always have a co-lister assigned. So Victoria, Landon, one of them is my co-lister. And they do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, communicating with you on, hey, is it okay to approve this showing? They bug the showing agent to get feedback. They're going to sit your open house. They're just there to be that extra line of communication. They're going to follow up with you once a week and they're going to say, hey, we had good showing activity this week, or hey, things have been slow. We're going to do another round of marketing. Don't worry. They're just going to always have that touch, right? At least once a week with you. If you need me, I'm in the group chat. I'm always there. I see all the messages. But if you need me and you're having concerns or you're having questions, I'm just a phone call or a text away, and you should always reach out. But you're also going to be getting updates and communication from my team, even if it's just, hey, things are so slow right now. We've done this advertising. We're doing this marketing, et cetera, et cetera. If it gets to the point where we're on the market like a month, 5 weeks, and things are still really, really slow, that's when I tend to talk to people about, okay, let's do a price reduction. Let's talk about moving the needle a little bit with the price. And the reason that that's important is it might not be a huge price reduction. It might only be $3,000 or $5,000. And sometimes sellers are like, well, that's not going to save a buyer very much money. Like, why are we doing that? It's more to put ourselves on the top of the pile again, because whenever you do a price reduction, the MLS will send out a notification like, hey, this property did a price reduction. And it sort of puts you back on the top of the pile. Because especially right now in our market, it's, it's May. We're like in PCS season until September. It's go time. And so many homes are coming on the market every day. And it's easy. It is so easy for a house to just get buried. And sometimes buyers or even agents aren't searching back 30 days or 45 days. They're only searching back 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And so if we're not careful and diligent, it is easy to get buried and then for people to just sort of skim over your property, even if it's a great property. So doing those price reductions kind of pops you back up here. People are like, oh, this house. So that's a little bit of a marketing strategy. We can do larger price reductions, or sometimes we'll do price reductions in conjunction with verbiage advertising a credit. Some sellers don't choose to advertise being willing to give a credit up front, which is fine. But if we're on the market, 4 or 5 weeks and we're doing a price reduction, I will sometimes encourage sellers to add the verbiage stating they're willing to give the credit. And again, just all marketing strategy and things that we can do. And we talk about those things, and it's not one size fits all. And it's just very personalized to you and what you're comfortable with as a seller. And that's a nice segue to the importance of pricing. The importance of pricing is, honest to God, one of the most important things that you can decide on as a seller. The most important thing you can decide on is your listing agent. The second most important thing is the price. And sellers think that because they're going to be expected to give this credit, that they can list their home for more to try to offset that credit, that loss. And I'm sorry to say, but appraisals don't work that way. You cannot list your home for more just because you're going to likely be asked to give a credit. When I come to listing appointments, I come armed with the comparable market data for your neighborhood, and I am going to make a very practical and real black and white case for why I'm telling you to list your home at the price that I'm telling you to list it. And it's going to have to do with what comparable sales have sold for and the condition of your property. And that is it. Because at the end of the day, the appraiser doesn't fucking care that you want to make $100,000 instead of $80,000. They don't care. And that's not a reason that you can list your home for more. And I quite literally had this happen the other day. I'm listing a home for a seller. They're making $93,000. And they quite literally, even though that is still about $5,000 or $6,000, the price that we're listing the home at is about $6,000 more than what the most recent comparable sale sold for. I'm already listing it higher than the comparable sale. This person really tried their best to be like, but can we list it for more? So my profit is like 6 figures. And sure, we can. But then we're kind of squandering our time on the market as a new listing. So just keep in mind that I have no ulterior motive. I've said this before. I talk about this a ton. You guys, I get paid on commission. So the more I sell your house for, the more I get paid. I have no ulterior motive to tell you to list your home for less. I'm telling you to list your home for what I'm telling you to list it for because we have to think about the appraisal. Unless you get a cash deal or if someone's doing an assumption, those are the only 2 times there's no appraisal. Any other time there is an appraisal, which means a neutral third party, being the appraiser, is going to come to your house and they're going to look at your property compared to the other recent sales. And that's how they're going to value your home. And I, as a real estate professional, I'm on the hook to get that appraiser the information and justification for why in the hell we thought or we think that this home is worth this much. So if I bring you a comparable sale and I say, hey, this property is exactly like yours, looks to be in the exact same conditions, same kind of updates, sold for this much, and you're like, yeah, great, but I want to list my house for $20,000 more so I can make X amount of profit or give the credit without losing profit. I can't tell an appraiser that. He literally, like, that is not a valid reason. Sure, I will list your house for that. You should shoot your shot, I guess, but just understand, as a seller, if the house appraises short, and by short, I mean if the house appraises for less than what we are in contract for, you as a seller are expected to reduce the price of the home to match the appraised value, because in this market, no buyer is paying over appraised value for a home. You as the seller are going to be expected to drop the price to the appraised amount. And if you don't, then the buyer has the right to walk away with no penalty. They get their earnest money back. We go back on the market. We have to find a new buyer and go through the whole process over again. Now, if we're reducing the price of the home, does that open the door for negotiations and maybe lessening a credit that you're giving them? Sure, like, we do enter a period of renegotiation, but please understand, as sellers, the importance of pricing is paramount. Like, it is, again, aside from picking your listing agent, it is one of the most important things that we can do. And I would even go as far as to say listing on the conservative or low side is more advantageous, even though it feels a little counterintuitive. You're like, list for as much as we can. Listing for a little bit less is a good strategy, because then people see it and they're like, oh, this is a deal, and we're going to get more interest. And then maybe we get multiple offers, and that drives competition naturally and gets the price up. And then when the appraiser calls me and says, hey, I want to come appraise this property, a normal question that they ask is, how many offers did you receive? And if we can show competition on the property, like, hey, we were on the market for 21 days and got 3 offers, and one of them was over asking price in this amount, and because it was so competitive, we took it, that matters. So this is a lot. I don't expect one podcast to answer or clarify all questions that sellers have. I more just want to reach out to sellers as a whole and say that I see you. I see you guys. I see you being very frustrated because you were buyers during a very competitive, crazy time, and you fought through that to secure a home. And now you're a seller in an equally crazy and competitive time, but it's still not to your benefit, right? Like, you were a buyer when it was more difficult for buyers, and now you're a seller when it's a little more difficult for sellers. And I know that's frustrating, and I see you, and I understand that frustration, and I acknowledge that frustration, and I try, and I hope I am, extremely compassionate and understanding to sellers that I work with, even though I do try to, operate in fact and educate on what's accurate and normal for the market. At the end of the day, I am a human being helping another human being through a very big transaction, normally during a very stressful time in life while they're moving and transitioning. And I do try to approach that with a lot of heart and compassion and understanding and openness of communication. So I know, sellers, that the struggle is real. You're riding the struggle bus. My team and I, we really are here to help in any way that we can. So if you're currently selling, I love you guys. You're doing great. If you're an upcoming seller and you're watching this in my virtual listing packet ahead of our listing presentation, we will talk about all this stuff in much more detail when I see you. And just as always, thanks guys so much. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. I wouldn't have any of this if it weren't for all of you. Bye guys.